Brooklyn, New York, November 1991. Members of the Farooq Mosque are raising funds for the defense of El Sayed Nosair. Nosair is about to go on trial for the murder of Rabbi Meir Kahane. Outspoken civil rights attorney William Kunstler is hired to defend Nosair. Eyewitnesses testify they saw Nosair crouched by Kahane holding a gun. But Kunstler convinces the jury that no scientific evidence links Nosair to the shooting.
Minutes after the verdict, the emotions that erupted in the courtroom spilled out of the courthouse. The supporters of El Sayed Nosair were jubilant.
And we thank God for that, because everybody in the beginning thought is Mr. Nosair, he's a murderer. But thank God for that, and he's innocent 100%.
I think it's a marvelous thing. I think the jury came to a reasoned conclusion, and I think that it's a big victory.
And followers of the murdered Rabbi Meir Kahane were livid, saying the system had not delivered justice.
There wasn't one Jew on that jury. There were black and white Christians, and you could rest assured that there was a Muslim on that jury.
This is a travesty of justice tonight here in the city of New York. This is a message to be sent out to the public that you can get away with the assassination of Jewish leaders.
It was tense in the courtroom as the verdict was read. He was found not guilty of second-degree murder, not guilty of attempted murder in the first degree for the shooting of the postal officer, and not guilty of attempted murder in the second degree for the shooting of the elderly man. Nosair was found guilty on the lesser charges, criminal possession of a weapon, 2 counts of second-degree assault, and coercion for commandeering a cab while fleeing the scene of a crime. Kahane followers shouted death to Nosair as the guards shouted, "Get out of here." So the emotions were carried outdoors, along with the defense attorney William Kunstler.
El Sayed Nosair was the young Palestinian so outraged by the poison that Kahane spread and was spreading throughout America and throughout Israel.
13 years ago, he moved to Israel, where he now crusades to throw all Arabs out of that country.
The Arab is a cancer in our midst. And you don't coexist with a cancer. A cancer you either cut out and throw out, or you die.
That he engaged in an act of political assassination, sort of Palestinian rage. I think that was the narrative that Bill had. But then Nosair insisted he didn't do it. That in fact he wasn't the gunman. He didn't pull the trigger.
Nosair's attorney argued Nosair did not kill the radical rabbi as he spoke to a group of supporters at the Marriott Hotel. Rather, he was framed. A gun dropped near him after he was shot on Lexington Avenue. William Kunstler, Nosair's attorney, suggested Kahane was in fact killed by disgruntled followers in an argument over money. Nosair was acquitted on the murder charges, despite the fact several people attending the Kahane speech said they saw him run from the room with a gun in his hand, despite the fact a cab driver outside the hotel claimed Nosair hijacked his cab and put a gun to his head. No one, however, claimed seeing Nosair pull the trigger. Nosair did not testify, but while bleeding and being treated at Bellevue Hospital that night, he claimed a man with a yarmulke did the shooting and that he ran from the hotel because he was the only Arab in the place.
They went in with that defense and it carried because nobody could say they saw him. And all the excitement, they saw, as usual, nothing. And they proved nothing. And that happened. It caused riots all over the world.
The trial was bitter.
There were several times during the proceedings itself where fights started right in the courtroom between these two sides.
We want justice! We want justice!
2 Arabs for every Jew.
Nosair smiled broadly tonight when the verdict came down. Pandemonium erupting in the courtroom. As Kahane followers screamed death to Nosair, Nosair followers erupted in cheers.
This story was a trick from some group of Jews tried to get rid of Kahane, which he announced before, years ago. Meir Kahane, he announced years ago that if he will be killed by one of his own group.
People speculate that Meir Kahane could wind up dead. You know that.
I know that.
And you have suggested that it would not be at the hands of an Arab, but at the hands of a Jew.
Yes.
Why would they want to murder Mayor Kahana now?
Because they are frustrated. They know of no other way to stop him.
You know, the guy had powder burned supposedly on his hand, and Bill got that guy acquitted. So he was obviously an incredible lawyer, but people were pretty mad at that, you know, very angry about what happened with Nosair.
Lining the entire courtroom, trying to prevent violence. They did prevent violence. There was no actual violence, but there was an emotional outburst when the not guilty verdicts were read. There was crying and screaming, and one Jewish supporter shouted, "A license to kill." Both outside and inside the courtroom, the reaction was emotional and explosive when the not guilty verdicts were read in the murder trial of El Said Nosair. Jewish supporters of the slain Rabbi Meir Kahana were outraged, and Arab supporters of Nosair were beside themselves with joy. The verdicts came after 4 full days of sometimes contentious deliberations. Defense attorneys say someone else shot Kahana, and the verdicts backed up their contention. But Jewish supporters of the slain rabbi who founded the Jewish Defense League say there was no justice in the courtroom.
The only justice for Nosair is Jewish justice, which is death. And for the rest of his life, he's going to have to look behind his back because he is going to be not amongst the living.
Amen.
And Kahana Chai, Kahana does live.
During the emotional trial, there had been almost daily demonstrations outside the courthouse, and tonight was no exception. Pandemonium broke out inside the courtroom as the verdict was announced. Dozens of Nosair supporters shouted in praise of Allah.
As Nosair's cousin Ibrahim Al-Ghabroni is spotlighted amongst cheerful supporters, surrounded by him, you can see an early glimpse of future conspirators and associates. This red-haired individual is Mahmoud Abu Halina, aka the Red, who will be dubbed as the World Trade Center bombing ringleader. The person below him is another Egyptian, Ahmed Abdel Sattar, who is known as one of the Blind Sheikh's aides and interpreters. He won't be known for engaging or charged with any terrorism throughout the course of the 90s, but Sattar will become a political subject of the Blind Sheikh 10 years later after 9/11. Also visible in other angles amongst Nosair supporters is this Palestinian, Mohammed Salameh, who will become one of the main World Trade Center bombing conspirators. But before Nosair's sentencing, Kahane supporters still sought vengeance and were determined to wield their power on an international stage.
We have assembled here today to seek justice for Kahana.
He stood in the same room at the same spot where his movement's namesake was assassinated and promised more protests. It was November of last year when extremist Rabbi Meir Kahana spoke at this podium, and moments later lay mortally wounded on the carpet, a victim of an assassin's bullets. El Said Nosair, the Egyptian-born Muslim who was accused of his killing, was found not guilty of the murder Saturday, but was convicted of shooting a Kahana audience member and a postal officer who wounded him as he escaped.
I was in shock, but not amazement. We predicted Jews in this nation do not often get justice in criminal courts.
It was a verdict that deeply angered Kahana supporters, and they are now demanding Nosair's extradition to Israel.
A special team of attorneys are on their way here from Israel to investigate the options for an extradition of Nosair to Israel to face charges for crimes against Rabbi Meir Kahana and crimes against the Jewish people.
That is just abject, emotional buffoonery. I don't think there is a legal basis whatsoever that would support Mr. Nosair being extradited to Israel. First of all,
Nosair's attorney, Michael Warren, is not worried about his client being sent to Israel, but about the possibility the judge may hit Nosair with a maximum sentence of 24 years.
I hope he does not allow this group of people to intimidate and coerce him into sentencing this man to the maximum sentence, because he has had no prior contact with this system, criminal justice system. He has a family, he's an American citizen. He should be entitled to the same benefit as any other person who goes through this system.
Nosair's attorney, Michael Warren, today said there is no legal basis for the extradition to Israel, but he takes seriously the continuing death threats.
These people have had a history of making these type of threats, and what's even more significant is they make them with impunity. You haven't heard Mayor Dinkins, you haven't heard Commissioner Brown, you haven't heard the FBI say anything about the threats that have been made, not only against the family, but against the jurors, against myself, against my co-counsels over the past several days.
And Kahane supporters still held protests and demonstrations on the Brooklyn Bridge.
And there are threats of handling the matter outside the law.
I believe and I hope that in the near future, Nosair will no longer be among the living.
Call in the FBI and investigate the possibility of bringing federal charges against Nosair for the violation of the civil rights of Rabbi Kahana.
The Egyptian is found guilty only of a minor weapons charge.